Imagine an airy workspace that feels like a modern oasis, or a cafe that's cosy and inviting, or a vibrant shopfront that draws customers in. Whatever space you're dreaming up, the IKEA Business Network is here to help you create a better everyday life at work. Join the IKEA Business Network for free and instantly access benefits including a one-on-one with an interior designer, member discounts and perks for your staff and family. So go on, join the IKEA Business Network now at ikea.com.au/business.
Hello and welcome to another episode of First Act, the podcast where we dive into the origin stories and inspirational journeys of Australia's entrepreneurs, business owners and influencers. I'm Cess Busby and my favourite flower is the frangipani, mainly because it brings back really good memories of my childhood. I used to walk home from school to my grandmother's house sometimes, so from Rose Bay up the big hill at Hardy Street up to Dover Heights, and there were lots of frangipani trees on the route, and it was also my grandmother's favourite flower, so I'd often pick like a whole stack of them to give to her when I came in, even though she had her own frangipani tree, so I don't really know why I was doing that, but it does bring back nice fragrance memories for me.
That is a very nice way to start the show, Cess, because we do have a guest today that is related to flowers. And by the way, I'm Adam Bub, and my favourite flower is probably a protea because it's South Africa's national flower, and that's where I'm from. It's where I was born, and my parents still have a protea at their place. So, you know, there you go. It's a little bit special. Today, we're excited to have a guest who's made a significant impact in the online business world, disrupting several sectors in the process. He's the founder of academic dress supplier Churchill Gowns, flower delivery service Floraly, budget-friendly luxe perfume brand Aerre, gosh, you're an overachiever, man, and startup accelerator Idea Crunch. Please welcome Alec Ramsey.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us, Alec. It's super exciting to have you on the show today, but let's go all the way back. We know you're a serial entrepreneur just from that intro, but where did it all start? Were you one of those kids that was, you know, the lemonade stand, or did you come from an entrepreneurial family? Was that entrepreneurial mindset part of what you had growing up?
I think you'll love this story. Actually, the first real entrepreneurial thing I did was in high school, and it was because I'd watched this TV show, which you guys probably would have heard of, called Jackass back in the day, where they all did these silly pranks. And one of the things they did was try and drink a gallon of milk in an hour. And I tried to do it, and it's impossible, obviously. But I went around the school and bet everybody in the school that I could possibly find that they couldn't do this as well. And I remember taking a group of about 15 or 20 people to the local park in the school where they all attempted to drink this huge amount of milk, confident they could all do it. And I think that's where I made my first, few $100s. And that really got me excited about business, as strange as it may seem.
Fantastic.
That makes my lactose intolerance just like a bit queasy. But man, God, good on you.
So then you were a bit of a cheeky entrepreneur then at school, but when did you decide that maybe business and management was something that you're interested in? Because I know you studied it as well.
I did, yeah. I studied a few different things. I actually started with a maths and physics degree and decided after a year that wasn't for me. Then got into architecture, I decided that wasn't for me either. And then went along to business and interspersed with some music playing. So I've had a pretty varied background in my early years. I first started a company with a friend of mine, not my business partner, Stefan, but with one of our other best friends from high school called Illyrian Jeans. And our kind of thesis was to make denim jeans for men, where we would get artists to do these designs down the side of the jeans. And so we really wanted to do something that was different. To be fairly honest, it wasn't a success. We, sold a few of them on consignment through stores in places like Newtown. But at the end of the day, we were too busy being university students and having fun and didn't put enough behind it. And I think that was my first good lesson in realizing that product alone doesn't sell itself, and you really need to have a good strategy for getting out there into the market.
What kind of designs were on the jeans?
Oh, everything. We mostly worked with students from COFA, the College of Fine Arts at UNSW, and it was incredibly varied. I mean, we tried to not do anything that was too floral because these were jeans designed for men, but we would have I think my favorite one was a black and white and an illustration of almost, they're all kind of abstract, but Roman-esque designs down the side. And I think this was like not just a little tiny badge on your jeans. It was like the whole leg of the jeans would be covered. It was, we tried to do something that was really different. It didn't work out, but it was quite inspiring and fun at the time. So that was my first little taste.
You might need to bring that back, given all the talk about how much men think about the Roman Empire.
Good point.
I think now might be the time. Maybe it just wasn't the right time for it. But as you know from business, look, there's a mixture of things that happen. A bit of magic. There's luck. There's timing, but there's a lot of hard work. There's skill. Everything has to come together. You've launched multiple successful online brands since then, and you made over 20 million in the process. But your first venture, Churchill Gowns, came about in an interesting way.
It did, yeah. So my current business partner in all of these successful ventures, Stefan, and we were also friends from high school, and he was at the time overseas in Switzerland at university, and he came back one summer, and we sat down, he said, I've been reading this book by Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Workweek, quite famous back then. And he said, I really want to start a business. And so he said, sure, sounds good. This is after I'd wound up the denim jeans company, Aerre Jeans. And so he sat down and just literally wrote out a list of, I think it was about 10 different ideas. Some of them were getting tailored shirts made overseas, and they were all e-commerce ideas. And the one that we settled on was graduation gowns. And the reason why was because this was at the end of my final university degree. I just graduated, and renting the gowns from Sydney University cost about $150 for 2 hours. And I just thought, this is insane. I'm sure we can get them made overseas for much less than that. And so after settling on this idea, I taught myself how to code, built the website, had to rebuild it within about 3 months because my first attempt was fairly terrible. We got the gowns made overseas in China. At that stage, Stefan was then in China. We brought them back. We only sold the gowns at first without any of the hoods or mortarboards or anything else that came with it, and just did the most basic marketing we could, which was flyering essentially. And we got a lot of students on board to be our ambassadors. This is really pre-digital marketing experience for me. This was just boots on the ground, and grew the business just straight from there. So, within a year, we'd started supplying almost all of the different universities in Australia. Not every single degree, because the degrees are quite varied. Sydney University has something like 3,000 different combinations of colors for their hoods. But we quickly expanded and made a success out of it. That was the first time we'd really pushed our way into e-commerce. And it was a great starting point. And then we decided, after expanding that in Australia for about 2 years, we recognized that there was a huge opportunity overseas in the UK. And so the UK is a slightly different market, but it's a country that's about 3.5 times the size of Australia. And so we thought, well, why don't we take the concept that we've got here in Australia and expand it to the UK? And so the first thing we did is we went online and put up some job ads to try and get a managing director, because neither Stefan nor I wanted to actually move to the UK ourselves. And so essentially we're hiring someone and saying, hey, we've got this great business model. We want to copy it overseas. We'll tell you how to do everything. We've got all the infrastructure. We've got the tech. We just want you to be the head of the business. And the person we hired, his name was Ollie Adkins, and he's been amazing for us. And so that was how we got our first taste of expanding our business internationally. And it was also the flow-on inspiration for what we've been doing with Idea Crunch, which is really replicating business ideas from overseas and now in reverse bringing them to Australia.
It sounds like, number one, you just made that sound incredibly simple when I'm sure it's very, very complex. But it also sounds like solving problems is kind of the key to successful entrepreneurship. You found this problem, you're like, oh, I could do that better. Here's a solution. Would you agree that that's maybe when people are thinking about ideas to come up with, they need to think about the problem and the solution they can bring?
I think that's a really deep question, to be honest. I think in a nutshell, yes, but that's not the route by which I would go about starting businesses nowadays. So every business you start does have to solve a problem, absolutely. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But whether you start from a position of discovering problems yourself and then try and solve them, or whether you flip it on its head, which is what we've done more recently, and find businesses that have already solved those problems elsewhere and really analyze it from a business perspective first, I think is a better approach. And I think it's something I'll get to a bit later. My opinion is this, essentially: if you are always looking at the problems that are in front of you and you experience in your normal life, then I think yes, you'll find things that are solvable, but you may not find a business that is scalable in doing that. For example, starting a small cafe on a corner that doesn't have a cafe is solving a problem because you're providing something that no one has, but there's a limit to how much you can scale that cafe. And so I think it really depends on what your intentions are as an entrepreneur. A lot of people make really fantastic businesses that support their lives by solving problems in front of them. But if your goal is to start a $100 million business or $1 billion business, then the odds that you're going to come across that problem by looking in your immediate sphere is pretty small. And so you probably want to start looking elsewhere to find other inspiration outside your normal life.
That's such a great point. So kind of on that note, you've got Churchill Gowns was your first experience of getting to that level and scaling and, moving something from, as you say, a problem that was in front of you, but actually a problem that you could solve on a wider scale. So what kind of scaling strategies and also at the same time challenges did you face while taking that business to market as your first really successful business?
Okay, so the first challenges we faced were the ignorance of the different marketing techniques. The landscape in digital marketing has changed a lot since then, but when we started Churchill Gowns, even though I'd done a business degree back then at least was very general in what it would teach you. It wasn't teaching you specifically how to do digital marketing, how to use something like Facebook or TikTok to market to customers. And so we did what we knew, which was, as I said, flyering and just calling up students and getting them to work with us. And so the challenges we faced in big part were our own lack of knowledge. We didn't know what we didn't know. And a lot of that were the skills that we picked up since then. And we've become quite good at starting businesses because we've now learned this really wide range of skills that you can draw upon to scale a company. So really, I would say the number one challenge was our own ignorance. And then the next challenges were very particular to the market. So we had, as you can imagine, a few universities getting quite angry at us because we just were essentially undercutting them and, I think quite fairly supporting students and giving them access to graduation gowns that they couldn't perhaps afford otherwise, but universities didn't see it that way. They saw it as us cutting their grass. So our number one challenge after our own ignorance was having universities contact us and threaten us. And so we had quite a few legal letters from universities saying, you can't do this. And our response was to turn around and say, are you sure about that? I'm pretty sure people can choose to buy from wherever they want to buy from. So none of those threats in Australia ever eventuated in anything. And then the next challenge was actually figuring out the reason why we decided to expand overseas was because we needed to figure out how we could reach a bigger market. And the market in Australia is somewhat limited because there are only so many students that are graduating. There are only so many students who are going to be able to affordably reach and convince to go with someone else other than the university that they're actually graduating from. And so that's why we decided to expand to the UK. We saw the opportunity of a market that really valued quality in the graduation gowns, unlike, for example, the US, where the quality component is not as important. So we saw an opportunity to be able to provide much better service with high quality in a market that was similar to Australia. And so our leap overseas to the UK was really driven by the necessity of wanting to scale the company, but not having enough opportunity here to do so.
It's an incredible journey, particularly considering how you were both out of uni and you just leapt into it and created this massive gown empire. It's pretty phenomenal. But you weren't satisfied with that. You have another startup that you launched not long after, where you disrupted the market again, and that's Floraly, of course. And what inspired you to dive into the flower business? Because, some people might say that's crazy as well.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect follow-on from my description of the way we scaled overseas to the UK with Churchill Gowns in hiring Oliver Adkins, our managing director over there. We realized essentially that if we were able to replicate our own business to another country successfully, then there should be no reason why we shouldn't be able to replicate other people's companies overseas that don't yet exist in Australia and bring those concepts here to consumers here. And so that's really where we launched Idea Crunch at the same time as launching Floraly. And the premise of that was to be able to help other scale startups, but specifically for us to be able to test this thesis of, or can we then replicate ideas overseas that don't exist here? And so Floraly was born from about 3 or 4 months of just hard research. And this is the flip side to the coin that we talked about before, where you asked me whether it's important to solve problems, and it definitely is. But this is the way we go about it now. We don't find the problems that are immediately in front of us. We spend months researching opportunities that we can see within Australia, but also overseas. And that involves literally getting together lists and lists and lists of companies, figuring out what they do, why it works well in their particular markets, why the companies that look similar to that in Australia aren't doing as well, and kind of identifying that opportunity. So Floraly for us was really a test of the thesis that, we could replicate something else and bring it here. Flowers weren't something that we were particularly passionate about. I mean, I've grown to have a love for them. But first and foremost, it was really just research and financial models and, the kind of nitty gritty. And I think that was a really good approach.
From a purely research perspective, I'm gonna give you a really hard question. Yeah, you might take some time to think about it. What is your favorite flower? As somebody who really likes financial modeling, but maybe wasn't as flower obsessed.
I was hoping you'd ask me this at the start. My favorite flower depends on whether you're asking me personally or as a business owner.
I'm asking you personally.
Personally, it's a peony. I just think they're fantastic, beautiful flowers. And also, I love any flower that I think is magic to be had from flowers where they're very seasonal, because it's something you look forward to all year. And then when they come into bloom, it's a kind of a very incredible thing. And part of what makes flower gifting so special, unlike other gifting products, is that you have to wait if you really love something. From a business perspective, it's an Alstroemeria, which is incredibly long-lasting. They come in a fantastic variety of colors and make really good parts of a lot of the bouquets that we sell.
All right, the salesman hat is on. You sold me. Look, Floraly has a unique approach to flower delivery. Obviously, you talk about seasonality, but sustainability and freshness is all part of that too, isn't it? So can you tell us about how you've implemented those into the business and also the challenges of doing that?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thing, because the company that we researched most heavily overseas and took inspiration from doesn't give a huge amount of emphasis to sustainability. And so when we decided to start Floraly here, that was something that we added on. Partly we did that because we have a very personal interest in making the world a better place than we've left it. I think that the onus for that really does lie on the shoulders of people who have the ability to change things, and so business owners in this case. And really for us, we saw also a huge market opportunity, because no one in Australia was trying to do flower delivery in a way that could be sustainable. And so from the outset, we thought this is a great opportunity for us to make a difference, but also to really differentiate our business. There's two interesting parts to that. So one of the companies that we take inspiration from overseas is called Bloom & Wild. They're from the UK. And their big pitch when they started was to be able to send flowers in bud in a letterbox, because in the UK, 90% of all doors have those little mail slits in them. And so you could slide the flowers through the letterbox. And when we saw that, we were like, oh, that's amazing. And then we walked around my suburb and realized that almost none of the doors in Australia have the same letterbox. And so that wasn't going to work. And so we had to find something else to lean upon to really differentiate us. And in doing all of our research, we realized that the way that flowers used to be ordered online through the kind of first online companies in Australia was that you would, kind of like Expedia, so that you'd come and you'd place a flower order, and those companies wouldn't actually handle any of the flowers themselves. They'd take that order and they'd forward the order onto a local florist who would then fulfill it. And the disadvantage of that is, one, you're having to feed multiple mouths in the process. You have to be able to have margin for the online retailer that you're buying it from. There has to be margin left over for the actual florist. And the florists have to sit there with a wide enough range to cover any possible order that might come in, which means that about a third of the flowers they have sitting in there end up dying before they're sold to consumers. So you get this huge amount of waste that goes on. And we knew that if we were able to put those two pieces together, so we were able to control the front end experience to customers, but also the buying and delivery and sourcing of all of those flowers, then we could do this in a way that reduced waste from about 30% to around 3%. And that's what we've been able to do.
Wow.
That's a pretty amazing journey. Especially when you think of all the components that are involved in the process and how you've really pared it back. So do you have strong relationships with growers?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. And that was a process on its own. I mean, I think having started Floraly in Australia makes a lot of other businesses almost seem easy, because there's a lot of problems you have to solve with flowers that don't exist in other e-commerce businesses. I was talking to someone this morning who works in food and beverage, and they have a really successful e-commerce company, and they were kind of having a laugh about the fact that their products had an expiry time of about 12 months. And Stefan and I also had a laugh and said, how long flowers last? 7 days at most. You have to get them in from the growers, and that same day you have to deliver them, and you have to deliver them to customers within a very specific time frame on an exact day that they've asked for. So solving those logistical problems was hard. And so at the start, we worked with a lot of growers through some of the markets, like city markets, because there are logistical issues to even get them delivered to. There's almost a bit of a logistics mafia in Australia when it comes to flower delivery from farms. And so we would have to find all these ways to be able to source the flowers as soon as we could, get them in, sell them straight away. And, obviously with the expansion of our business, we've been able to work a lot better and now directly get the flowers from the farms themselves. Yeah. So it was a process to get there, but we're really happy to be here.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It certainly did disrupt the way flowers are delivered in this country. So, and its consumers are probably very grateful for it as well. Anyway, we'll be back with more from Alec Ramsey after this short break.
Need to refresh your workspace? Want discounts for your business, your staff and your family? The IKEA Business Network is here to help you create a better everyday life at work. Join the IKEA Business Network and instantly access a range of exciting benefits tailored to your unique business needs. It's free to join, and you get access to quick fix design tips, member discounts, and some amazing perks for your people at over 400 retailers. Join the IKEA Business Network now at ikea.com.au/business.
So, Alec, we've established that you're a serial entrepreneur who really likes to disrupt traditional markets. But with your latest venture, Aerre, you have really taken on some big guns there. It's the luxury fragrance houses of France. So why is fragrance ripe for disruption, and how have those big brands been reacting?
This is really interesting. So first part of the question, why is it ripe for disruption? I think my immediate answer to that is that it's somewhat obvious. Luxury fragrances are incredibly expensive, and they're able to be expensive because the big fashion houses that produce them have excellent brands, and I really respect the brands that they've been able to create. But the margins that they put on top of the fragrance, on top of the production cost, are astronomical, like absolutely unlike anything I've ever seen in any other industry. And so, we really saw an opportunity to be able to make the same quality fragrances for far less and to be able to sell them for far less. So, I think the answer to why they're ready for disruption is really price. And then how have they reacted? Well, they haven't really reacted, actually, to be perfectly honest. I think this is an interesting thing because in many ways, if you are a luxury fragrance brand, it would somewhat maybe damage your reputation to even acknowledge something like what we're doing. They trade on their brand and the idea that luxury is hard to get. And so to admit that someone else can even do the same thing that they do, I think would be shooting themselves in the foot somewhat. So we haven't had much reaction from them. But I think the other part to recognize about why that is quite interesting. So from the outset, when you look at Aerre, you might think that what we're really doing is we're trying to steal customers from luxury fragrance houses and be able to provide and undercut them. But actually what we're doing is we're providing people who never would have bought those luxury fragrances because they couldn't afford them an opportunity to be able to get the same scents. And it's something that surprised us actually after we launched the company, is that the vast majority of our consumers are actually people in their 20s. And they're either people that are on their fragrance journey, so those that haven't yet decided what their fragrance for life is going to be, and now are given the ability to try 10 different genuinely luxury scents, or it's people who have decided what their favorite fragrance was because they tried it once in an airport or a shopping center, but we're never going to be able to buy one of Tom Ford's fragrances, and so they're able to come to us. So I think the other reason why the luxury companies haven't come after us is because at the end of the day, we're not really stealing their core consumers. Their core consumers are luxury buyers who, it matters to them when someone comes over to their house and they see the Tom Ford bottle in their, bathroom cabinet, and they're not the people that we're targeting. And so that's part of the reason why they haven't come after us. And I don't think we're really actually taking customers away from them.
That's so interesting. It's really, you made me think about it quite differently in that your competitors are actually more the mid-range and even on the cheaper end perfumes that the people who can afford, the people that can afford those would be. But at the same time, I think the question around intellectual property and intellectual property and a scent.
Yeah.
I think that is really interesting too. So if Tom Ford picked up an Aerre perfume and was like, hang on, they're using the scent that I've trademarked, is that a murky area?
It's actually not in most countries in the world, because so the way that intellectual property works with fragrance in particular is that the courts have essentially determined that most people's noses aren't good enough to identify exactly what one fragrance is by smell alone. And so if you can't do that, if your average person can't do that, then you can't really uphold any copyright in a court of law. And so as a result, most countries like Australia say that you can't have any IP law around the scent of the fragrance itself. I think the classic line they use in this type of law is that if you try and copyright the scent of fresh strawberries, well, fresh strawberries might smell different from one person to another person. So it kind of becomes impossible to pin down. So from the IP side of things, no, it's actually totally fine. Then the kind of next question to ask about is comparative advertising. We reference these brands in our advertising directly, and we say, the product we have here is inspired by Tom Ford's Midwood, for example. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we're not at all pretending to be Tom Ford, and we're not pretending to be Chanel. We're not trying to dupe consumers. We're basically providing the only way you could ever identify a smell online, which is by referencing something else. It would be like saying this smells like fresh strawberries. So, it's actually been fine from an IP law perspective so far, and we're pretty confident in our position.
Yeah, you certainly explained it in a very clear way that made it seem like there was no issues.
Yeah.
So one question I've got, though, is all of Aerre's fragrances are made in Grasse, France, the same place where all of the big luxury brands make their perfumes.
Mm-hmm.
You could have made your perfumes anywhere. Why was it important to have your products made there?
This is a really good question. So the shortest answer to it is that it's about giving a trust signal to consumers in marketing. So I think the honest answer, there is a lot of expertise that sits in Provence and in Grasse, in particular in France, around making perfumes. So from a production side of things, you will be able to get the quality of fragrances faster with less testing. The honest answer is that Australian perfumer could source the same quality of ingredients in Australia, probably, but that if we were to say made in Australia and not made in France, then I think your average consumer wouldn't see us as being the same perceived quality that these luxury fragrances are. And because we're an online D2C company, the most important thing for us is conveying those trust signals. If we were to be, for example, just manufacturing and selling in retail stores in Australia alone, I think being made in France wouldn't be as important, because the scents themselves would stand for the quality. But consumers aren't able to smell things online. And so we need ways to be able to tell people this is the real deal. Like, we're actually getting made in the same place, so that they believe and they buy. And that's exactly why we did it.
So following on from that, like launching any new product, any new brand, that always comes with risk, not just to the business, but also to the consumer. You talked about that trust piece, the consumers trusting the brand enough to, give it a crack. So how have you made sure that people will be willing to give Aerre a try? Because as you say, you can't smell a fragrance online. So they really do have to trust that what you're giving them is going to smell the way you say it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few parts to that. One part is how you communicate your marketing, and that means using a lot of really genuine, sincere forms of marketing. But basically, the main form of marketing, digital marketing we do, is by just sending samples out to influencers and just asking them, tell us your opinion. We don't tell them what to say, and they record those videos and they put them online. So I think there's a lot of sincerity communicated through that kind of advertising medium that you can't get if you're running an ad that you put together yourself and you've curated yourself, because these are honest reactions that you see. That's part of it. But then the second part to the answer, which I think is completely necessary, is that we provide guaranteed returns, no questions asked, for any of our fragrances. If you buy 3 or more fragrances, then shipping is free in both directions. And so we create an environment where it's completely risk-free. Someone can see our ads, they can get excited, they can come to the website, and they can say, well, all right, I'll just buy 3 fragrances. I'll try all 3 of them. I'll keep the one I want. And if I don't like any of them, I'll just send all of them back and I won't lose a single dollar. So we recognized that trust piece was going to be incredibly important, and that was going to be a hurdle to people to have to jump to be able to buy from us. And on as a result, we tried to create an environment where it was going to be risk-free for the consumers.
That's so interesting because you've spoken quite a bit about the marketing of it. In terms of advice, and anyone listening who has an idea, how do you kind of articulate that? How do you get to that point where you go, you know what, I've got this really simple cut through here? What's the thought process there?
That's a good question. I think, given I've been living and breathing e-commerce for 10 years, some of it is instinctive to know, when you've got a concept that's going to cut through. I think I like to think of it from a PR angle, public relations angle. I think that if you can condense what you do into a short enough sentence that will make a headline for an article, then you've got a message that's going to cut through. And not all businesses like that, but we have specifically chased down businesses where the concept is so easy to understand that what you're disrupting is so different and so quick to grasp the consumer that you could put it in a headline of an article. And that's been kind of our litmus test.
Yeah, because as both Cess and I can attest, because we write articles on the daily, so we're always looking for a soundbite or something that is that people can digest. And that is I think that's a great tip for anybody that's listening who has a business and that's trying to think, what is it that I respond to? How do I quickly grasp an idea? It is not simplifying it. If you say in 5 to 10 words, like what it is that you're selling, it's actually not dumbing it down. It is just making it accessible so that people can grasp onto it and your business can grow, which is what you've obviously seen.
Yeah, I think clarity is really the key there. You need to be able to, I said, condense the concept. You need to be able to make what you're doing incredibly clear in the shortest number of words possible. And if you can do that, then people will be able to understand it and get as excited as you are as easily and as quickly as you can possibly deliver it to them. So I think clarity is kind of the most important part there. And that's what a lot of people don't get when they first start businesses, is trying to cut words out and really deliver, a concept, a sales pitch in as short words, a few words as possible. I would also say, though, actually, that it really depends what type of business you're running. So these businesses that I've started and that we're discussing right now, these are companies that are trying to be disruptive. And so to be disruptive, you have to be able to express what you're disrupting succinctly. But there are lots of other successful businesses out there that aren't disrupting, that are, for example, starting a restaurant or a cafe, or for example, selling iPhones online. There might be a million different resellers of iPhones, and they're not doing anything that's different, but what they might be doing is either meeting a different part of the market in a different place, through, for example, different channels, or they might be communicating brand differently. So when I talk about having a succinct differentiator in describing your business, that's for a specific type of company. And they're the companies that I pursued, but I think there's other ways you can do it.
Yeah, I like what you say there, because there's going to be people who are listening who go, you know what, like I'm an accountant, or I'm a lawyer, or I'm someone. I'm not. It does feel like there's this increased pressure for everybody to be kind of innovating all the time, because technology does help you do that. But there are people who are listening and going, you know what, I need to research my local area, or I'm going to target X people in the Sydney metro area or the Perth metro area, and it's just going to be, I'm a cafe that's servicing those people. So where do you start when you're researching?
We do our research from a purely business numbers perspective. There's obviously that litmus test we talked about a second ago of whether a concept will resonate. But beyond that, the research for us really focuses on getting data. So it's, at the stage we're at now, buying databases of other companies to figure out what traffic they're getting, to kind of figure out how many orders they're putting through, and then overlaying that with a bunch of other data we get elsewhere, and then creating financial models to figure out if I started this business, what would it really look like here in Australia? And I think for us, that data-driven financial approach to it is indispensable. And I think that if someone was to ask me, for example, should I start a photo studio, around the corner? Should I rent a warehouse and do this? My answer wouldn't be, well, do you think there's an opportunity, or, how do you feel about it? My answer would be, first and foremost, what are the numbers? If you start this studio, like, how much is the rent? how many rooms do you have to fill constantly? What are the margins? How, what do you think the occupancy is going to be like? How much does it cost to acquire customers? I would do all of those financials first, and then I would, either keep the idea or get rid of it. So that's how we do it. We basically get as much data as we can. Then we build financial models for all of these different ideas that we have, and we pick and choose between the financial models, and then we start looking deeper and deeper into the actual concept themselves.
So that's basically kind of what you do with Idea Crunch, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So what if I'm an entrepreneur, but I've got no idea of what I want to do? I just have an entrepreneurial spirit. Can I come to Idea Crunch then and you will go, hey, Sass, here's this list of ideas. Which one floats your boat? What's the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we use Idea Crunch is twofold. One is to be able to give other people ideas for businesses. I'm a big believer in what I would say is game selection. So not all businesses are built equally. And if you choose a type of business that has all of these great attributes to it, whether they be financial or otherwise, then you can make a greater success out of that. People talk a lot about how execution is 90% and idea is 10%. I think that's right, but the idea has to be a really good idea, because you can execute all you want on a cafe, but you're not going to be able to usually make it much bigger than a cafe. You're restricted by the actual operation in the business it is. So yeah, I think the way we use Idea Crunch is that we help people get these ideas if they don't have them, and really we use it from our perspective as a way to curate and understand who are the great entrepreneurs out there, so that we can leverage them for our own companies. So we're kind of giving and taking back at the same time. We're able to give those people ideas about what to start, advice on how to grow their businesses, and at the same time seeing who are the people out there in Australia who have this great talent that we can then draw upon for our other companies.
To be honest, I don't know where you find the time. Sounds like you've got so much on your plate. How is it that you manage to balance all of these, multiple businesses? Plus, you're a dad, you've got 2 kids, yeah?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Like, how do you manage your time, and how do you make sure that, you're still having time for what's important to you, like your family?
Yeah, look, my days are, I have hard bookends. I drop the kids and pick them off at daycare 5 days a week. So I only have a limited amount of time in the office, and that means that I have to be efficient. I think also Stefan and I are really, really good at outsourcing and setting really clear KPIs. So we're not micromanagers. That's one of the answers to your question, how I find time, which means that we're not spending our time doing every single little detail. And yeah, we're really focused on setting clear KPIs for our employees, so that if someone knows what their goal is and they have to, for example, for Aerre, create 25 pieces of content a week, let's say, then we don't need to be talking to them for hours a day and making sure they're doing the work, because at the end of the day, you can just look at whether the content got created. So I think being efficient in management is all about setting really clear KPIs, and setting really clear KPIs is all about having a really clear strategy and goal for your business. So it starts at the top level of what's your strategy, what's your goal, and then really, honestly understanding what are the KPIs that will achieve that goal, breaking it down, giving it to people, and then all you have to do is be able to make sure they're hitting those KPIs, and you won't spend as much time managing as you think.
Gosh, you've given us so much value out of this interview, and it's a shame that we're almost out of time. God, I'm going to squeeze in one last question for you, and this is like kind of looking very big picture at from your first act to now. Is this where you thought you'd be?
I laugh very frequently about the idea that I am selling graduation gowns and flowers and perfumes, because there's no way I would have picked that. These would be the products. These would be the things in my life that I would wake up at 4 a.m. thinking about deeply. Is this where I thought I'd be in terms of success? I don't know. I don't think I ever really thought about it. I think the reason why Stefan, my business partner, and I do what we do is really because we're genuinely interested in business. This is the way I see it. I love playing board games, and to me, this is like the most complicated board game there is. So I don't think I ever really thought much about how successful these companies might be, and all I really thought about was how much fun it would be to solve all of these problems in creative ways, and that's what we keep doing.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's just been fantastic having you on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
As Adam said, so many incredible insights and such a great story to be sharing with our listeners. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Sess.
Yes, look, it's been fantastic. Thank you, Alec. Thank you so much for joining us today as well, our wonderful listeners. Thanks for tuning into First Act. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and join us next time for more inspiring stories from Australia's finest entrepreneurs and influencers. Bye-bye for now.
See you next time.